All right, welcome to part 2 of Basics of HTML with Mr.Scienceholic. Last time we were here, we set up our VS Code, and after we set up our VS Code, we ended up with this screen with a whole bunch of stuff on there, which I did not get into. And today, I'm not going to get into all this either, because let's just learn the basics first, right? So first, one of the first things that showed up was doc type, declaring that this is HTML. Right. The second thing we want to look at is just opening up and saying, hey, this is an HTML document, right? And all our stuff is going to go right in between these two tags. With that said, do you need VS Code to type in HTML stuff? No, you could just use Notepad or something basic kind of editor, right? You don't need just a text editor. You don't need even a code editor or anything. So if you don't have a fancy computer, or even you got the most basic thing ever, use Notepad or something simple. Okay. With that said, we have our HTML. The first thing we want to look at is, well, the head of the website we're doing, right? And one of the most important thing on here right now for the basics is, well, our title. Okay. Oops. Spell that wrong. Title. Okay, and what is the title? Well, let's just say my first web page, right? And as I type this, you should be able to see this change happening right here on the tab in my first web page. With that said, let's just stick to that for now, right? That is our head of the web page. That's going to go on top. We'll talk about the metadata stuff and things like that in more detail later, but let's just learn the basics. Next, once we have the head, we need the body, okay, our website. And everything we are going to put in is going to be right inside here between the two body tags. Okay, so with that said, what is our next thing we're going to need is, well, let's do heading 1, okay? This is my first heading. Okay, notice how that is big letters on top, right? And if you want to compare this, you can say H2 and say this is my second heading, right? And notice there is a big space between these two and a considerable difference in size. Okay. The next one we're going to learn is going to be, well, our paragraph. This is where our stuff goes. Okay. This is first paragraph. Okay. First paragraph, and notice how the font is considerably different compared to H1 and H2. So if I was to put in and say, hey, let me put another paragraph, oh, not the correct one. Here we go. This is my second paragraph. Notice, right, there's a big spacing between these two. What if I want to just say this is my third paragraph? Okay. Spacing. Now what if I want to add the fourth, right? If I just hit enter and say this is my fourth paragraph, notice that that doesn't actually go to the next line on the actual website. It just kind of continues on the same line itself, right? So we want to make sure we avoid that. And what we can do is we can say, hey, let's just do a break, right? Let's put a line break on here. Oop, not bold, break. Okay. We can put a break, and that puts that fourth paragraph into the next line. And notice that this spacing is quite different, right? So this might be something you want to use when you have actually multiple sentences. You want to put it together as a one paragraph, and then use the P for when you actually have to separate the paragraphs. Now, one other thing that I find really helpful, right? Really helpful when we do coding or any kind of what do you call it? Well, coding, I guess. And something I kind of wish I was better at is really commenting. So what we have here is we're learning the elements, or the basic elements of HTML, right? So we can say, hey, comment-wise, these are the basic of HTML. And notice the comments don't show up on the website, right? These comments are for you who's sitting there writing the code or developing the website, right? Or this might be something you might want to write for somebody else. So let's say you make this website, pass it off to the next person, and the person might want to look at here and go, oh, well, what do they do, right? What do I have here? What comments do I have? So something for them to use, right? Maybe like if it's something complex, you might want to put a lot of comments as you go so that somebody else coming in to look at what you're doing kind of follows through and says, hey, let me look at what's happening. Oh, okay, I get it, right? Otherwise, they might have to just sit here and try to figure out what your code is trying to tell them, right? This is simple right now, but as it gets complex, I think these things are very helpful, the comments. Those of you who want to study more than just HTML, right? The way I wrote comment here for HTML, right, is different than you would for, I don't know, CSS, Java, JavaScript, C++, right? Each has its own little thing. But a very good idea to kind of know how to put a comment for yourself and for anybody else that's going to be looking at your code. So these are some of the first elements of HTML. So next one here, let's look at a couple of HTML attributes, right? Okay, HTML attributes. So what are these, right? What do attributes do? So what they do is they provide additional information about HTML elements. So elements can have attributes, right? Attributes, they have additional information. They have a start tag. And then they usually have like a name value pair, right? So what do I mean by this? Well, let's just look at the most common one, right? What does web pages have? Well, they have links, right? You can go from one page to another or somewhere else and so on. So one of the first ones that we look at is, well, let's look at this, say, dash herf attribute. Okay. And what does this do? Well, let's look at the most basic one here. Like, so let's say href, right? And let's go to .google.com, right? And you might, depending on what you have, you might have to do .:google.com, right? And you want to do that and notice the closing right here, right? The closing tag shows up, and you might want to say, well, you know what? Before we even get there, notice there's nothing here, right? There's nothing that's showing up on my actual website on the right, and I can type in saying link to Google, right? Now notice that is blue, right? Our link tag. There we go. Before we do that, you know what? Let me just put a break here, right? Make sure I put that on the next line. No, I could have put a new paragraph, but I'm just going to continue. Link to Google. The other one we want to look at, let's put a break here. Put a comment, is src, right? Src. Source, right? And well, what do websites have? Well, other than links, they also have images, right? So img, right? And then where is this image coming from? Okay, well, this image is coming from, let's say, src equals, and in quotation mark, well, wherever it is, right? Wherever you put the image. So if you have it in the same folder, you could say image.jpg. Okay, now here is the problem, right? I don't have this image. I don't have an image called image.jpg in my folder. So notice the broken icon right there, right? So the image is broken. There's nothing that it has actually can access and display on the website. Okay, now with that said, one of the things that we also need to keep in mind is maybe for somebody else who cannot see the website and maybe the computer is going to read to them, or if somehow the website fails to load the image, right? We probably want to put an alternate text, right? Alt. And here we might say image of an icon, right? So some kind of icon, right? Maybe an arrow that says go forward or whatever. So when the image doesn't load, you can see that the text, the alternate text, actually loads on here. And you know what? Let me go ahead and create a paragraph here so there's actually enough spacing between these two. Okay, so image of an icon, nothing going on. At the same time, maybe we don't want the actual size of the image, right? The website might be designed in a certain way where that image is ridiculously large, and if you try to load it as is, it's gonna take up the whole page. So we might also want to limit the size of the image itself, right? So we could say width, I don't know, let's go 500, right? And then we can say height, and let's just make it a square, right? 500. Notice I got nothing there right now, right? So we can kind of play around with this when we just play with images on a different day. And then one other one we want to look at is this comment. We can say style attribute. Okay, so let's look at style attribute, and what we can say is, all right, let's take this paragraph, right? Let's say this paragraph is very important for us. So paragraph, right? And we want to make sure that whoever is looking at this website really looks at this, right? So we can say style, and what do we want, right? So if it's important, maybe let's change the color, right? We can say red, right? Red tends to be something that people will look at, their eyes get drawn to, right? And yeah, let's color red and say this is a stop sign, right? Well, because stop signs are red, why not? The stop sign, and you could put anything in there, so on and on. Now you could also, make the stop red and so on, and we'll look at the details of this and so on. So the other one, now at this point, I'm going to assume we're all coding in English. If not, what you can do here, if we go to the top, we can specify that, hey, this is HTML and language is going to be English. To be fair, I have not tried putting any other languages on here. That might be something I might have to actually play around with, or if you do, put it in the comments, see what you get, right? See how that works out and so on. And you can also specify, right, like different languages, US, British, although the spellings and so on and on. And that should be it for now, right? So here are some of the basics, right, of the elements: the header, paragraph, breaks, right, link, image, and now we have the source, href, and style. Okay, so we'll play around with these, right? The best way to learn how to do any of this is just to play with each one of these. So next time, what we can try to do is, actually create a paragraph with a heading and so on, and then we can add that into a table and try to create something a little more fun looking, right? I mean, this is kind of just boring. This might be something you might bump into back in the 90s when, people were making websites, and even then there were ridiculously terrible looking backgrounds and so on and on, things like that. So the only other thing to keep in mind as you learn this is to keep an eye out for these quotes, right? Make sure you get your quotations down. These are where people tend to mess up a lot, is especially if you don't have a something like VS Code that helps you kind of auto-generate some of this stuff. You might kind of forget to do that. You might forget to actually close these tags, right, and so on. So make sure, right, so which ones needs closing, which ones don't. Notice my break, no closing. My paragraph has a closing, right? My H1, the heading 1, heading 2 has closing. My title has closing, and so on and on. All right, with that said, happy learning, and we'll see you for part 3 soon. Enjoy.